Hey everybody, and welcome again to On the Rezz. I'm Pastor Jason Smith. I'm here with Pastor Cliff McGraw and Jason Cagle, our Director of Student Ministries. We're so excited to be here with you and to talk more about our sermon series right now, Summer Vacation. I'm sure it's all that's on your mind. It's all that's on my mind. It's school's out next week. And so what's left but the kids coming home? They're going to be home all weekend, or all summer weekend. Oh my goodness, I wish. I'm kidding. They're going to be here all summer. They're going to be excited to do things, to be outside, I hope, but also they're going to be asking to do all kinds of adventures, going to friends' houses, hanging out, having fun, going swimming. I'm sure the water park will be in our future. There's all kinds of things they're going to do. We've got lake time coming up in a week or so. Next weekend, we're going to go hang out at the lake. Man, it's going to be absolutely fun and exciting.
Chaos.
Yeah, that's the word, chaos. But looking forward to it. And so with that on our minds, we started the sermon series last week talking about the grandeur of God, talking about how wonderful and great God is, that everything we see around us when you're driving to and from work or to the schools, or you're just out on a drive and you're looking at the beauty of the earth, and to think that a God, that it was created by a being, and that this God could create all that you see. Imagine what God's created for us. Imagine the love that God has for us, and the passion that he has for us, that he was willing to send his one and only Son for us. So God has given so much and created so much, and we just look past all of it, it seems like, so often, and we just look so much at ourselves and, am I happy? Am I doing okay? Am I going to be all right? Am I successful? Am I making money? Am I, and we often turn our eyes and our gaze away from God. And it's very hard when you get into a hard situation, a difficult situation, when the life around you is not going well. I think all of us can attest to this in life. It's very hard, right? When you're just so focused on yourself and so focused on what's going on, when all of that breaks down, it's almost like you've lost everything. And I think we all get there at some point in life because we don't have God at the center of our lives all the time. And when everything falls apart, we fall apart, And that's different than getting tired, right? I mean, I'm talking about like to the point where you were just trucking along, everything's going well, and then maybe you lose your job, right? Or maybe you lose a loved one, or maybe all of a sudden there's inflation that you can't explain, and you can't afford groceries anymore because your $50 grocery bill is now $400. And so wait, is that happening to y'all too?
You can explain it, you just can't afford it.
You can't afford it. There it is. There it is. Okay, so you can explain what's happened, but you can't afford it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same thing though in our lives, is we get so caught up sometimes, and I try to teach my kids this as well, because it's not always going to go well at school. They're not always, friends aren't always going to be nice. They're not always going to make the team or the performance or everything. They're going to make mistakes. And if it's only about that one performance, which I know a lot of times that's what ends up happening, it's all about that star test, or it's all about this one thing. And if you don't do well on that one thing, it just feels like everything around you you failed or has fallen apart, or you thought, oh, I'm going to make this team, and then you don't, and it's like the end of the world.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Oh, yeah. A favorite saying of my girls, tell me if this is in y'all's houses with y'all's girls, that's not fair.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Big sister gets to stay up a little later. That's not fair. Or this one got ice cream on this occasion. Or Hadley gets out an hour earlier than all the rest of them. So what do we do with her? Well, maybe she gets to go to McDonald's or Sonic for a snack. Well, that's not fair.
I'll tell you the best I ever heard was from one of our church members, Drew Reiser. He said this at a men's thing once, and he said, fair is for cotton candy and merry-go-rounds.
Yeah,
okay.
the fair. Yeah.
So so whenever my kids say that, I now say that, and yeah, it's kind of like, it's not always going to be fair, but yeah.
It's like close, right?
I like that.
Horseshoes.
McGraw girls, prepare yourselves to hear that line.
I love it. I love it. So then we moved into this week, and on this week we were talking about, and it was funny, I named it patience, because I couldn't think of anything else. Like, what other word do you use when we were talking about being patient in waiting. And it's not just patient in waiting. One of the things that I think we especially these days, is patient waiting on God. Paul, we didn't talk about this yesterday, but Paul believed that Jesus was returning. I mean, in a very short time. I mean, even possibly
imminent.
right the moment Paul died, Jesus is returning. Like, that's how close Paul believed it was. I mean, Paul writes his letters, and some of his letters, he just sits there and goes, if you can't control yourself, then get married. But if not, stay single and just spend all of your time bringing people to Jesus.
Because it's any minute now.
It's any minute now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got to hurry up.
Yeah.
And then I love it because Paul and Peter, they always, kind of.
They have a back and forth.
They do go back and forth. And, you do the same thing. Here's Peter in 1 Peter, and he's chapter 4, and he's writing about patience, and he's talking about being patient, waiting on the Lord. Wait on God. We talked about in the Psalms, right? And we went through this Psalm 24, and we were talking about being patient, waiting on the Lord. Wait for the Lord. And we do not live in a society of patience these days, do we?
Oh, no.
It's all about having it right now. I mean, the fact that like Grubhub and DoorDash are as successful as they are, that we are too busy now to drive to the fast food restaurant, not get out of our cars, and get the food and go home, that we now are like, well, we'll just pay the extra amount and have it delivered. I mean, it's okay if you're getting ready for a party or something. I get it, but like, I'm gonna go have dinner. I'm just gonna go grab something. Oh wait, it's too much of an inconvenience to go to Taco Bell. I'm just gonna have someone else go get it for me. I mean, we want everything, and then of course, I don't know about y'all, but I've gotten to the point where when I'm looking on like Amazon, I'm like, where's the same day deliveries?
Right.
Yeah.
I want the same day deliveries.
Prime 2 day is no longer good enough.
Prime 2 day is no longer good enough.
What is that?
Can it appear
Can I
tonight?
spend $25 to get my stuff today?
See, Jason, that's exactly what I was about to say. So then you buy that, you see that thing for $18, right? And you're like, oh, I need $7
$7
more. And so now you're searching through, and you may really want this brand, but you're going to get this brand that's a little cheaper, but it's in the $25 mark for same day delivery. And so now you buy it so that you can have them both delivered today.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's crazy.
I mean, my proof is also this light right outside our window here. I'll drive a mile that way or a mile that way to not have to sit at that light
absolutely.
2 turns, because if it backs up, you're going to be there for a while.
This is true.
That's what the cut-throughs are for.
I mean, even so, you're like, you're putting your life on the line cutting through sometimes, and it's probably a better idea just to wait a little bit.
Yes,
But it's horrible.
But we have to have everything right now. And so we think about that when we pray. And that's where I really was going where yesterday was when we pray for things. If we're praying for a church, you're praying for a healing, right? And I think that's one of the things a lot of people get discouraged in, is that we sit there and we pray for healing. And it doesn't happen the way we wanted it to. Or it doesn't happen immediately or as fast as we wanted it to. It takes time to heal. I think about like loved ones who pass away from like cancer. They've been through, a ton of treatments, right? Or a loved one that is going through treatments, or you're trying to find a cure for that disease, and you want it to happen right now. But it doesn't. And I've sat by too many families in just my time as a pastor, too many families who have prayed for their loved one, who are devout. I mean, these are the people that they show up to everything. They lead the Sunday school, the Bible studies, small groups. They're your spiritual warriors in the church, and they're praying for their wife or their husband or their child, and they still pass away.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not healed the way that they had prayed for. And what does that, and then people go, okay, well, patience, does that include, and I believe it does, because that patience, even after they pass, you're sitting there going, well, God, heal it now. I mean, now what? And I even think about what Martha and Jesus at the Lazarus tomb, in John chapter 11, and she runs up to Jesus and says, if you were here, you could have fixed it, right? Like, and I think of that same thing, like we We get to the point where we're like, well, God, you could have fixed it. Why didn't you? Or, God, I prayed for this for 6 years. Why didn't it happen? And to be able to wait on God and know that God is bigger than everything else in this world, but bigger so in the fact that God knows how it ends. And to remind ourselves of that and what it looks like to have full faith and full trust in God. And in doing so, we can find peace and that patience of waiting, and what to do in that time. One of the things, I know y'all have dealt with these things, but like even our church, I think one of the things that people, that a lot of people left their church, they left their building, and they went and they started this church that meets in a high school and a bank building. And all of a sudden, they're sitting there going, well, we want our building back. We want a church building. And they want it right away. And you sit there and you go, but, are we going to make this happen as human beings and physically build something just because we want it now? Or are we going to allow God to guide us and to bring about what is truly supposed to happen in God's own timing? And that kind of thinking, I believe, can go into all aspects of our lives, because we want everything right now, and we're so afraid. There's another thing that goes on. Y'all know this. I don't know if everybody hears this, but FOMO, right? I mean, we know what FOMO is, but it's a newer term. I say newer. It's a newer term from like 20 years ago, but fear of missing out, and we have a lot of that too, and that guides our patience or lack thereof. And so, yesterday we pushed on the idea of being patient in all things, in all ways, and giving all glory to God. And I challenge people to serve while they're being patient, waiting on God. So whatever God might be doing, whatever God might be bringing about, instead of waiting for that one thing, to start serving others. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder of the fact that, we preach all the time that the church is not the building. It's where we meet, and it's convenient a lot of times, but we ourselves are the church. And so I think we have a good constant reminder every week that we don't have a building. So do we not have a church? No, we absolutely have a church. We have a thriving church with a lot of ministries that's doing a lot of good things, and it's because the members are the church. And so, again, I think that's a great reminder. Now, sure, would it be convenient to have a little more space to stretch out, or, other sized rooms to do some of the things that we dream about and want to do? Well, yeah, it will be great, and we can plan for those, and we'll be ready to launch those whenever the blessing does come. But till that point, we wait on the Lord. So,
and the thing about, I love the idea of incorporating the prayer aspect to it, because for me, prayer, even when things I don't understand, or the timetable, prayer is always kind of like the go-to. I kind of look at prayer as that comfort for me. Like, it's that safe space. It's that when we talk about safe spaces, for me, prayer is that safe space. It's that comfort zone of, okay, this is where I can be in this prayer in this moment, and just, while I'm asking for the things for, that's going on in my life, asking for that patience, and even going so far as to say, what can I learn from this? Like, what can you show me from this? I had a hard time with that. The first church that I was no longer a part of, due to a budget issue, I took it personally, even though it wasn't my fault. It was like, hey, we just can't afford to keep you on. And I was so mad and so angry. So then when fast forward 10 years later and it happens all over again, I looked back and go, well, wait a second. I remember what got me through that. And that was just spending time in prayer. And, it was a rough patch. It was a rough go of it, not knowing what was going to happen the next day. But I wasn't freaking out. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in a panic. I wasn't in a worry, because, well, I remember what God did the last time, because I just spent some extra time in prayer. And so, I took advantage of the time that I had off to go to the park and go to quiet places and just spend some time in prayer, because it just was comforting, and it helped me in those moments. So that's one of those things, like praying without ceasing, like always be in a state of prayer, always have that in the forefront of your mind, and where God's in this. That's how we invite God in the center of all of our things. And so I love that connection to prayer, because I look at prayer, especially when I need those moments, it's comfort, and it just draws me closer to God, and it just gives me that rest that I need from all the worry and fear.
Amen.
Yeah. It's that idea that God's going to do what God's going to do in His timing, but prayer helps align myself with Him in that timing, and talking to Him, and through that relationship of that back and forth and that wrestling, and that even though we're safe, we're still almost like a wrestling match type of thing, but it's not really God moving. He's always close to me.
Yeah.
It's me actually aligning myself with His
Yep.
timing in that. And yeah, it's not always easy, but it is always beneficial. So
Yep.
yeah.
Well, and just the constant reminder I even said yesterday, is that God is always bringing about goodness and mercy in our lives. And so whether we may or may not be able to see it in the moment, I think that's the hardest thing, is living in the moment, because we don't get to live in the past. We don't get to live in the future. We live in the moment. We live right now.
Yeah.
You are never promised tomorrow. It could be a fleeting moment in any time. All of a sudden it's gone. But in the moment, God is always trying to bring goodness and mercy to our lives. And you see that even with the disciples, right? I mean, the disciples who did not understand God continued to miss out on it, continued to not get the fact that Jesus was like, hey, I'm going to die, and this is my body and my blood, and it's going to be poured out for you. And they're like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. Like, I think we do that in our own spiritual lives too sometimes, is that like when things become so easy, we're just like, oh yeah, cool, that's great. And then when it becomes difficult, God, fix it now.
Right.
And if you don't fix it now, then you're not God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is so interesting in that fact. And so I think it's hard for us to think about the fact that God already knows the ending, right? Like God is omnipresent, right? And so God is present in all things, but God also is seeing things in the future, in the past, in the present. God doesn't live on our plane. Doesn't live in the same worlds we do.
Well, we put limitations on God based on human standards.
Correct, space and time, right? Which is the only thing we live in. We live in space and time. We have space around us, and we have time that continues to click on, and there's the only thing we can explain is through space and time. Everything has to be explained through that. It would take millions of years to create the world, billions even, to create the universe, right? All of these different things, and evolution and all of that, but instead, right, of giving God the credit for building all of these things and creating all of this, we just say that it magically happened on accident.
Yeah. That it took all those years.
Right. And then think about God's patience, right, in creating this.
Yeah.
I mean, just the patience there. But giving our patience over to God and saying, God, I put my life in your hands, in your control. Guide me, lead me. I'm not going to sit idly by either and wait, which is, I think, something that we've gotten into. And they even, in the early church, they fought this. So in the very early church, in the first 100, 200 years of the church, they had people that just sat back and watched. They were called Gnostics, and they didn't believe that they physically could do anything good because the human body is so evil. And so because of that, they couldn't do anything good. So they didn't even serve. They didn't do anything. They just sat around telling people about Jesus and waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And wait, no, we are also called to serve this world. We are called to be servant hearts. And so, one of the things that we do when we're waiting, and even, in God's timing, it may be next week, it may be in 6 years, it may be different than what we thought it was going to be. But filling that time with serving others, filling that time with serving God, is such an important thing that we can do, because like our prayer life, it brings us closer to Jesus.
That's right.
It brings us, it makes us vulnerable too, which I think is a great thing for Christians, to be more vulnerable in our faith, that we can put ourselves on the line, put ourselves out in front of others, and tell people about our faith, because we live in a world today where Christianity is nothing but a bunch of people that go into a building and don't talk to anybody. You're not welcome. You're not invited. And they sit there and they worship this God that hates everybody. And that's what people believe. And that's what the world is starting to believe. And so by serving and getting out, we change that narrative that the world's trying to do. We also have to start standing up for what we believe. because we have stopped doing that, and we've started getting to this culture of, well, we'll just let them live their own lives and we'll live ours. And the problem is they're not just living their own lives, they're influencing all of us. They're influencing our churches, they're influencing our children, and they're changing the way that we thought the world worked or what was important. It used to be what was important was your family, right? Your church, religion, and your health. I mean, it was taking care of the basics of life. And now today it's people's feelings and emotions, and these are the more important things, and you're going to get your feelings hurt. I don't think anybody's ever been told that they were wrong and said, man, well, everything's fine. My feelings are not hurt. I mean, it's going to happen, but we can't live our whole lives worried about everyone's feelings. Instead, what we should be worrying about is everyone's souls. And I believe that's the thing that we're missing out on these days in our world. And it's because of the impatient society that we live in today that everything has to be now, now, now. And because we live in that, when God doesn't answer a prayer right now, it means there's no God to those people.
Yeah. And it's all the more reason why service is so important is if you're meeting those needs and you're proving over and over again that this is what we're working towards, this is what we're about meeting these needs and serving, people can't use the excuse against you, well, you don't care about me, or, you're just out to have to change me or to push on me or make me uncomfortable. It's like, well, I do want to make you uncomfortable if you're not living the way that you should, or if the choices that you're making are directly impacting what we believe in, then yeah, I kind of want to make you a little bit uncomfortable, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But you will never doubt the fact that I love you because we have met all of these other needs for you, and we have this relationship where you know who we are, our heart as a Christian. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah. So in the sermon, as I was just kind of working through it, I was just trying to. There was a couple parts I didn't even say because timing wise, we were running out of time like crazy yesterday. We had a bunch of announcements and things at the beginning. I think with the rain, we were kind of trying to let people trickle in that we're running a little late because downpour started 5 minutes before service, so everybody was coming in soaked at the last minute, and so I know we started a little late. So I was cutting some things out. And one of the things, that I'd really wanted to push on a little bit more yesterday that I didn't get the opportunity to was the fact that when we're being patient for Christ, when we're being patient for God, I think one of the hardest things that we have to deal with is the fact that it's uncomfortable, and we often shy away from that, I think, and I really didn't get to push on that enough, because what I have always found is that when I'm trying to be patient and everyone around me is impatient, that uncomfortable feeling that I have often nudges, I guess, or pushes and makes me feel that maybe I'm wrong. Y'all ever had that feeling? And you're sitting there going, wait, but I'm being patient. I'm waiting on the Lord. But the constant impatience just kind of pushes on your heart, and it kind of nudges you away, and it just becomes. And you kind of mentioned this even when you were talking about your job that it was over, and you're sitting there going, oh my goodness, and it's just like it's that uncomfortability that it brings, and we just don't like being patient, and it's because of that. It's because the world around us is impatient, and so you're going against the grain, which kind of what Christianity has always been about. It's always gone against really a lot of the things that society pushes us towards. I'm not saying it's against things, but it pushes against the grain, right? We're not against anybody. We love everybody, but at the same time, we do push back in certain things in Christianity. And one of the things is that God's timing is different than anyone else's. I mean, the Jewish people lived in exile, right, for years and years and years. I mean, they were in captivity in the Egyptians for over 400 years. That's a long time. I mean, it's longer than our nation's been around. Like, the United States hasn't been around that long. So imagine living in that life, right? And you're sitting there trying to be patient on God to come save you. And 400 years, are you going to start losing hope in that patience, right? I mean, the nudging of everyone around you, just give up. Let's start worshiping the gods that they have, because obviously their gods are right. I mean, one of the things I hear a lot of times is, well, God or Jesus hasn't shown up in 2,000 years again, so did God abandon us? Did God leave us? And I keep thinking about the fact that God continues to show up in people, continues to show up in the church. We just don't write any more books about it.
Right.
You know, it's not in the Bible anymore. It's a printed book, or it's a pastor, or it's someone giving a testimony, someone who's gone through this patient walk in life, when everything else around them said, keep you need to push on, you need to, ignore God or go beyond what God's doing. And now they come back to you and tell how wonderful it was being patient. And I think the disciples learned that too in their patience. They went from completely not understanding Jesus to dying for him. So there was obviously a huge change in their heart and their lives, and they understood the patience of waiting and the uncomfortable, how uncomfortable it truly is to be patient for the Lord.
I think the best recent example of that was not having a job during the middle of the pandemic.
Oh my goodness.
And because at one point I had a job offer. I had a church, and then they said, okay, we got this offer for you. We're excited for you to come up. And then 2 days later, they said, hey, we need to push back your start date because of this. He goes, there's something, I don't know if you heard, but they canceled NBA games. And I was like, oh yeah, I've heard about the COVID something. And it was like, so we need to hold it back. We're gonna not have service for a couple weeks. And then it was, hey, we need to do another couple weeks, and then another couple weeks, and then it was like, hey, we need to rescind the offer because we don't know if we're gonna open back up. We are giving, and then so that whole season, I mean, it was almost a year, and it was like, oh wow, so having that patience and having that trust in God. And there were moments where I thought I could freak out, looking back on it, but then I didn't, because, well, number one, I had an awesome wife who was like, we're going to be okay. Like, we're balancing everything. We're figuring stuff out. Plus, we weren't spending a lot of money because all the toilet paper was gone. So there wasn't anything to spend on. But we were...
The good old toilet paper crisis.
But we were fine. And I looked back on that as probably one of the best years, because there was a lot of, yes, there was patience, but there was a lot of trust, saying, okay, here's what God's going to do. But the rest of the world was like freak out mode. No toilet paper, no water, no paper towels, all this stuff, like we got to take everything because the world's going to end. And it's like, well, first of all, if the world ends, this is not the worst thing, because I'm fine. I'm ready. Like, come Jesus now, let's go, But it was just that in the moment, in those little pockets of moments where I easily could have freaked out, there was no reason to, because I've seen where God has taken his people, has taken others, and what he's done personally in my life. So it was easier for me to go, okay, I'm just going to sit back, and it was awesome. And, and it was a great time with family, with my kids, reconnecting, bonding, having all those moments again. It was, I mean, honestly, it's one of those blessings in disguise. But again, we're a world is saying, freak out, freak out. It was like, no, let's trust in God. Like, God's got this. Like, we're going to be okay. And we were. We came out unscathed and great, and I was ready and recharged. And then next thing you know, the church opened up, and that's went from one path to another until eventually ended up here, because God had a plan. So
I think another hard thing about the patience is the flip side of that coin is miracles still exist. And you do hear stories of, my family member has cancer, and then they lay hands and they're anointed, and next thing you know, they go in for a review and it's gone. And you hear those stories, or you get laid off and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then a better job offer lands on your doorstep. Like, that's another really hard thing about patience, is hearing those stories and knowing, man, God is so good, and we believe it, and he's full of love. And so it causes some of those feelings of doubt, like, well, why isn't it happening to me? Why isn't it my loved one? Am I not praying hard enough? Do I not have enough faith? Am I sinning somewhere else? And just losing sight of, it's not like a vending machine, and it's not a Santa Claus is just going to show up at this exact time and bring you that gift. It's that relationship and that timing that we don't understand and will probably never have a good answer for the why. But it's always good to be reminded that no matter what, we're not alone in it. That
Right.
Jesus walked through it with us. The pain and the suffering of losing those close to him, of sickness and injury and these type of things, the loss and those things. Yeah, it's just patience can be hard sometimes.
Yes.
So
Yes, and I think that's one of the biggest things we deal with in our society today is the lack of patience. We live in the like we talked about with Amazon. We live in the I have to have it right now patience. And you see that in Martha with Jesus when Lazarus dies, and Martha's like, "Hey, if you would have been here, you could have saved him. Like, why weren't you here?"
yeah,
But we also forget that Jesus took his time, multiple days, right, to get back from, let me be clear, a very short walk. Like, we're talking maybe a couple hour walk took him days to make. Now, I imagine he was stopped constantly, people wanting to touch him, talk to him, pray with, have him pray for them or heal them. There was a lot going on, but Jesus also wept. He mourned. He was sad. And Jesus actually was patient in a whole different way, and that was patient in dealing with the hurt and the pain that he was going through. So there is a patience there that's beneficial to our personal lives too, that I think is very, very big, that we don't hold on to a lot of times, is that Jesus wasn't just healed from his sorrow.
yeah,
I mean, he was in a way. Let's give him the credit that he brought the friend back to life, and so he's like, "Hey, look, now he's here walking among us." We pray for whoever is getting saved right now.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't know if y'all can hear all the fun happening behind us, but we do live on the the corner or the
Yeah.
the main stoplight of Katy here, of Old Town Katy. But
That's an interesting thing from that story is it's almost like Jesus is also waiting on God's timing in that story.
Yes.
Like he is doing the ministry on the road. He may have even wanted to go heal Lazarus immediately or go be there for him, but he was doing these other things, and he's listening in his own relationship with God, who's saying, don't rush it, don't wait, or be patient, you will get there. And then the bad things continue to happen, and then Lazarus dies altogether. And Jesus's own feelings of, I lost my friend, and he didn't have to experience death, I could have been here. And then he also listens to God saying, well, this isn't the end this time. And so it's just wild to think about, that even Jesus is listening to God's timing and growing in his relationship and obedience to the voice of God through all of that.
And you're 100% right. If Jesus had not have been patient for God's timing in that moment and taking that long to get back to Lazarus, he never would have died right in the first place, because he may have come by there. But after his death, right, because the reason I say that is because Martha said if you'd have been here, he would never have died. And so obviously Martha believed that Jesus knew about it before Lazarus passed away. But not only did he wait and take his time to get all the way back there, but he waited so that we have the story of Lazarus, which is one of the most famous stories, but it has lots of parts to it that we don't even think about. The first part is the fact that Jesus is able to foreshadow the fact that after someone's been dead for 3 days, they can be raised from the grave. And he's been telling his disciples about him dying and being raised in 3 days. And so now he has this actual image of it happening, and you got to wonder if his disciples are starting to go, wait a second, like, he keeps telling us about this. Was he talking about Lazarus, or is he talking about him? And so now they have but they also have the faith to know when he dies, like, maybe he could be. So when he was raised from the grave, they were like, oh, well, we've seen it before. It kind of gave them that, but it also gave the Jewish people a lot of hope in the fact that this might be the Messiah. I mean, look, he just raised someone from the grave.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, if he had shown up before Lazarus died, this is very interesting. If he had showed up before Lazarus died, we never would have had this story of him raising someone from the grave. And if we never had this story of raising him from the grave, the reason that Caiaphas and the chief priests decide to finally crucify Jesus is because he raises Lazarus from the grave. He becomes too powerful. The miracles are too great. And now you have a man that people are going and telling everybody about that has got to be the Messiah. He's got to be the Son of God. He's raising people from the dead. And that same thing happens, if you think about it, when the patients of Mary and Jesus, his mom, at the wedding of Cana, right? If he had never changed water into wine, it never would have got out to the Galilee that there was someone that could do this, that there were signs, right? I mean, that's what John the Baptist was waiting for. He was looking for the signs that he had shown up, that Jesus was there, that the Messiah that he had been telling everyone about was actually starting to show up. Because if he had never done that, then people would have just looked at him as a nice prophet. But the moment he performed his first miracle, it kind of set forth this whole chain of events, right? And it was all in the timing of God. And I love that, in the patience that Jesus had. And so thank you, Cliff. That's
Yeah.
I was thinking of the wedding of Cain story too earlier. I was like, well, wait a second.
But the same thing happened, right?
But it's funny that you brought that up. I was thinking the exact same thing.
Because he kept saying, it's not my time, it's not my time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was time.
Yeah. To me, it brings up another facet of the story, which is the fact that, we have such a good New Testament and Gospels, and yet we know Jesus had this close relationship with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus because of the emotion that he feels. We don't have any of those stories. You know what I mean? I mourn for that. I wish we knew more about their relationship and some of Jesus's actual life. But I think we have what we have for a reason, and it's because it was about the ministry and the transformation and us impacting our own lives, and not just trying to read the story of Jesus and gain knowledge of Jesus, but actually be transformed in our own lives because of that.
Right.
But yeah,
well, I think that's a lot of
I
the
just
New
wonder,
Testament.
Man, I'd love to, that's one of those heaven type questions. Like, how were you guys so close? What'd y'all like to do together? Those kind of things. So.
Well, I feel like that's a lot of the New Testament. The Old Testament, I feel that you do get a lot of the emotions and how they were feeling, and, a lot of David and Saul going back and forth, and their shortcomings and all that. But when you get to the gospel, it's all about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Not about his relationships with people, right? But maybe his interactions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, it was the interaction of bringing Lazarus back to life that was most important to the story. I'm sure to Jesus, it was also the relationships and the people he knew and loved, and same with them. But
at most, we get Peter, James, and John.
Well, right, but even
and that relationship, but
even them though, when they get super excited or something, they always have a teaching moment, right?
Yeah, and there's still not a lot of details.
Exactly.
About,
It's mostly the teaching moments that make it into the New Testament, and so we lose a lot of those relationships that you're talking about. That we gain in the Old Testament. Or that we have. And the Old Testament writings are so long, a lot of them, because of this.
Yeah. I guess I'll just have to be patient before I get the answers.
You will have to be patient. It's absolutely true. Yeah, man, it's a hard thing, and the world just pushes back on it so hard. They don't want us to be patient. And so, if they're going through a lot of things in your life, if you're listening today and you just feel like you've been praying for something and it just doesn't feel like it's happening yet, or if you have just been going through just the depths of hell in your life and just the hardest time, and it just doesn't feel like you're ever going to come up for air, trying to be patient and slowing down, and instead of trying to force an ending or an answer, the peace that you're going to find is just overwhelming. And you have to be able to sometimes sit back. And I think we live in a culture and a world today, especially with social media, where we're constantly afraid of letting people down, and we do so much extra than what we really need to. And so being patient for God, being patient for what Jesus is going to bring into our lives, You think about the disciples, right? They were the opposite of patient in just about everything they did. They wanted Jesus, to save everybody right now. They wanted Jesus to just jump up and be the Messiah today. They didn't want him to go through all of the things that he was going to have to go through. They were confused often when he wouldn't just stand up and say, "I'm the Messiah," that he was making people guess at it, that he was using parables. You can see their frustration after the parables when they're like, "Jesus, what does this mean?" And he's trying to explain it to them. The patience that was lost, and I know that you're gonna have moments in your life where patience is just not going to be the answer that you want, but it's the answer most of us need. And when we live in a world that is so fast now with technology, where we could have a bomb go off on one side of the world and find out within minutes, if not seconds, on the other side of the world. We just live in a different culture, different world than we ever expected to even 30 years ago. And there are going to be things on our lives that are just pushing. And it's because of this fast technology and this ability to be in all places at all times that you're going to feel like you can't perform, you can't get it done, or that no matter how hard you try, it's just always going to be worse and worse and worse because you're seeing everyone else's life online is also not going great, and so it makes that patience even harder. And what happens is a lot of doubt starts to set in, and I want y'all to know that is a normal, very normal reaction or feeling to have when you're patient, and the patience seems to be for naught. And it's not the fact that the patience is for naught, but sometimes our patience is going to take longer than what we want. And I guess that's the opposite of patience when you have a time limit on your patience. And so if you're being patient about something right now and you're praying about it, I want to encourage you to also go do something. Not go try to fix what you're trying to get through, but instead go volunteer somewhere. Go serve, maybe at a church, maybe your local church, the church you're a member of. Go get involved. It could be anything from just greeting people on a Sunday, standing there and just saying, "Welcome, I'm glad you're here," having interaction. You're going to have a lot of people coming and smiling, hugging on you, shaking your hand. I mean, if anything, that serving is going to make you feel like this whole patience is something that's worth waiting for. And I believe that is exactly what the gospel and the New Testament is trying to push on us, is the fact that we are now patiently waiting for Jesus' return, and we don't know when that's going to be. And until that time, we are going to serve. We are going to bring people to know Jesus Christ, and we are going to love on this world. And we're not going to give into it, but instead we're going to push this world just as much as this world pushes back on us into a relationship with our Lord and Creator, Jesus Christ, because we know that no matter what happens in this world, no matter how long we have to wait, even if it's until the time we sit before Christ and say, "Hey, I got a lot of questions," God is working in our lives. Whether you want God to work in your life or not, God's working in your life. And God is trying to bring about goodness and mercy in your life. God is trying to bring about a love that's beyond understanding, a love that is for you and for your family and for your friends and for all people in this world. God loves you so much that he sacrificed his son so that you can come into a relationship with him and know that you are loved by the Creator of all of the universe. Friends, be patient in life. Be patient in waiting. But at the same time, while you're being patient, go do something. Go have some fun. Go serve Jesus. Go serve God. Go volunteer at a food pantry. Go volunteer to read to kids. Go do something and serve this community. Serve the community you live in, because that's what Christ has called us to do. And God will answer prayers. God answers the prayers, even if they aren't the way we were hoping. God will answer prayers and bring about that goodness and mercy in your life. I'm so thankful for these two guys and for our church and for this community we have the opportunity to serve. And while it is fast and furious at times, it is good sometimes to also just be patient and to wait and to watch God work, because God has continued to do amazing things. And I'm so excited about what God's going to do in the future here, but also in Katy, Texas, and all across this world. Thank y'all so much for joining us We'll see y'all next week. Y'all have a great week. God bless you.